My name is Arthur Miller. I'm 71 years old. The day my daughter looked me straight in the eye and said, "Dad, you disgust me." I didn't say a word. I didn't get angry. I didn't yell. I didn't ask why. I just stood there, watching her lips form each word like a blade cutting into my chest. Some sentences, once they're said, echo in your head until the day you die. I don't remember how I reacted. Maybe I just turned around, sat down in my chair, and stared at the cup of coffee getting cold on the table. A drop of coffee fell and spread like a stain of black blood. I heard my heart beat slowly, and then just fade. My daughter, the one I carried in my arms her entire childhood, now found my very presence repulsive. I'd become truly old, not because of the white hair or the curve in my back, but because I was starting to understand what it means when love becomes useless, when it's no longer wanted. But instead of yelling, I smiled. A bitter smile, like someone who just got a death sentence but is still trying to look dignified for the crowd. I don't know if I smiled to forgive her or to say goodbye forever. I went out into the yard. It was getting late, and the sun was spilling over the rose bushes that my wife, Rose, had planted years ago. The smell of the roses mixed with the damp earth reminded me of the old days. Rose died 4 years ago. If she were alive, she probably wouldn't believe that the daughter we were so proud of could say something like that. I bent down and touched a flower that was just starting to open. Its petals were soft and warm, like Rose's hand. Inside me, something broke silently, without a sound. I didn't feel anger. I just felt empty, like my heart had turned to stone. When the person you love most in the world tells you your existence makes them sick, you don't just lose them. You lose your sense of self. I went back in the house. The room was flooded with yellow light, so quiet I could hear the tick-tock of the clock on the wall. On the table, an old photo of Rose, me, and our 2 daughters. Emily was barely 8 then, sitting on my lap, holding that expensive doll I had to sell my only car to buy for her. I remember when she hugged my neck and said, "Daddy, you're my hero." Now, that hero is nothing more than someone who makes her hold her nose when she walks by. I turned off the light. The darkness poured in like water, filling the house. I said softly, to no one in particular, "Rose, I think it's time for me to go. Staying will only make them despise me more. I don't know where I'll go yet. I just know that tomorrow I'll start to disappear. Not for revenge, but to save the last bit of dignity I have left." Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments below. Before everything went bad, there was a time when I thought I was the happiest father in the world. I still clearly remember the first morning I held Emily in my arms. She was tiny, reddish, her little hands fit in the palm of my hand. Rose was lying in the hospital bed, her hair soaked with sweat, but she was still smiling. "Arthur, look, she has your eyes." I smiled, and I knew that my life, from that moment on, belonged to that little girl. When Emily learned to talk, her first word wasn't "Mama," it was "Dada." I still remember how she'd run to me every time she heard my old truck pull up to the gate, her arms stretched out, smiling so wide she'd drool. She'd wrap her arms around my neck, bury her little face in my shoulder, smelling like milk and soap. There were nights I worked late, and Rose would have to bring her into the living room because she wouldn't sleep until I read her a story. "Daddy, tell me a princess story," she'd beg, and I'd tell her one. I don't know how many nights we fell asleep on the sofa, the yellow porch light filtering through the thin curtains. Rose used to say I was such a devoted father, it was almost too much. I bought my daughter everything I never had. I worked 2 jobs so she could go to the best school. I bought her a piano, even though no one in the house knew how to play it. I just wanted her to have the chances I didn't get. Every time I saw her smile, I felt like all the exhaustion was worth it. When Emily grew up, she became a beautiful, well-behaved young woman. My friends would say, "Your daughter looks just like her mother." And Rose would just smile, "But she has her father's heart." I believed it. The year she applied for college, I would secretly walk 3 miles to go to church and pray. I asked God to let my daughter always be happy, even if I had to suffer in her place. Then Rose died. The house went quiet. It was just me and the ticking clock, Emily was already married. She had 2 small children. She was busy. Sometimes she'd call, asking quickly, "Dad, are you eating okay?" and then hang up. I didn't blame her. I understood that youth is always in a hurry. I just missed her voice saying, "Dad," like before. Until one day she came back knocking on the door with her 2 kids. I thought it was a gift from God to fill the emptiness in my life. She said, "Dad, I need a place to stay, just for a little while." I didn't let her finish. I just threw the door wide open. "This will always be your home." When my grandkids ran through the living room, I felt my heart start to warm up again. I thought maybe my old age wouldn't be so lonely after all. But I didn't know how short-lived that joy would be. I didn't know that the house, once filled with laughter, would soon become a place where I'd have to tiptoe, afraid of the sound of my own footsteps. And I never imagined that the little girl who once called me her hero would be the first one to make me wish I could just disappear from this world. The day Emily came back, it was drizzling. I heard a car engine stop out front and then urgent knocking on the door. When I opened it, I saw her there, soaking wet, her hands gripping her 2 little ones tightly. Mason looked at me with his big, bright, dark eyes, and Sophia was clutching the old doll I'd given her mother years ago. "Dad," Emily said, her voice choked, "I have nowhere else to go." I didn't ask any more questions. I just stepped aside and opened the door wide. "Come in, honey. This is always your home." She stood still for a few seconds, and then she burst into tears. I felt her shoulders shake as she hugged me. A strange hug, looking for safety, but at the same time, full of hesitation. 4 years after Rose's death, it was the first time I felt the warmth of a loved one in my arms again. That afternoon, the house, once so quiet, came back to life. Mason ran through the living room, looking at every old photo on the walls. "Grandpa, look! It's Mommy!" he yelled, pointing to the photo of Rose holding Emily as a baby. I let out a laugh I couldn't even remember the last time I'd used. Sophia, on the other hand, followed me out to the yard, asking to help me water the roses. She bent over, took a deep breath, and said, "Grandma's flowers smell so good, Grandpa." Hearing her clear little voice felt like my heart was mending itself. That night, Emily cooked. She set the table carefully, calling me with a sweet tone, like when she was a girl. "Dad, eat up. I made your favorite." I nodded and thanked her. In that instant, I believed all the sadness was over, that God was giving me a new beginning. In the following days, the house filled with laughter and conversation. I'd take Mason to school and pick Sophia up from her painting class. At night, they'd sit next to me and listen to my stories about my youthful travels, about how I proposed to Rose on the banks of the Ohio River. The 3 of them listened, fascinated, as if they were fairy tales. Emily smiled silently, a tired but still warm light in her eyes. I thought that, despite her divorce, her mother's heart was stronger than I imagined. I pulled out old photos to show the kids. Mason asked, "Grandpa, is this Grandma? Why is she smiling so pretty?" I answered him, "Because she loved us, just like I love you." Emily lowered her head, hiding a tear that was about to fall. I didn't ask her anything. I just put my hand on her shoulder. "You're going to be okay, honey." I really believed it. I thought her return was a miracle, a gift Rose was sending me from heaven. After 4 years of loneliness, I had a family again, laughter, a reason to live. That night, as I turned off the light, I stood in the darkness listening to the kids breathing in the next room. I whispered, "Thank you, Rose. You brought them back to me." I didn't know that this newfound happiness would fade as quickly as a dream in the rain, and that, starting that day, in this very house, I would learn that the deepest wounds don't always come from enemies, but from the very people you've held with open arms. The first few days were so beautiful, I thought I was reliving a past chapter of my life. The house, once silent, was filled with laughter. In the mornings, I'd make coffee and open the window to let the sun in. Mason's voice would yell from the stairs, "Grandpa, wait for me!" While Sophia ran barefoot in the yard, watering her grandma's roses with a little red plastic watering can, Emily made breakfast in the kitchen. The smell of toast and butter spread through the whole house. I'd stand in the doorway, watching that scene and feeling my heart warm up. I thought maybe God had heard my prayers. After 4 years of loneliness, he was giving me back my daughter and my 2 grandkids, as if returning what I had lost. At night, we'd eat dinner together and talk. Mason told stories from school. Sophia showed me the pictures she drew for me. Emily would smile sweetly and say, "See, Dad, they love Grandpa more than they love me." I'd laugh and pat their heads. I'd forgotten what it felt like for someone to call me Dad, Grandpa, that soft warmth, like Rose's breath when she was still alive. Some afternoons, Mason and I would watch baseball together. The boy would squeeze my hand when his team hit a home run. Sophia would sit in her chair, swinging her legs, nibbling on an ear of corn and singing while she ate. Emily sometimes would stand by the window, looking at the yard in silence, her gaze lost. I knew she was thinking about her ex-husband. I didn't ask. I'd just bring her a hot cup of tea. She would take my hand, smile at me gratefully, and in that grip, I felt a weariness that couldn't be put into words. At night, when the kids were asleep, she and I would talk at the table. "Dad, I don't know how to start over," she'd tell me. "At this age, nobody wants to hire a woman with 2 small kids." I'd answer her, "You can start anywhere. This house is yours. Just relax, don't worry." She was quiet for a moment and then asked, "You don't mind?" I shook my head and smiled. "Mind? What could be happier than hearing kids laughing in the house?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Dad. I don't know what we'd do without you." I went to bed late that night. In the dark, I listened to the kids' peaceful breathing in the next room and the wind coming through the yard window. I thought that, finally, I had gotten back the most valuable thing, the feeling of being needed. I hadn't felt so at peace in a long time. I imagined Rose smiling somewhere, watching us eat dinner, watching the kids run in the yard. But joy is sometimes as fragile as the dew on rose petals in the morning. A single touch is enough to break it. I didn't know that in that same sun-filled house, the first seeds of humiliation and contempt were already beginning to sprout, cold and silent like an underground wind, and that soon the laughter of those days would be replaced by a silence so thick you'd have to be careful just to breathe. It all started with very small things. At first I thought it was just differences in habits between 2 generations, that after so much time apart, living together again required a little adjustment. But then, Emily's offhand comments started to leave little scratches on my heart, scrapes that didn't bleed but hurt quietly. One morning, while I was sitting at the table clipping my nails, she walked past me, frowning. "Dad, you should really do that in the bathroom. It's pretty unhygienic." I looked up. I nodded without answering. That afternoon, while washing my hands, I caught myself in the mirror, carefully checking each finger to make sure there was no dirt under them. Another day, she told me, "Dad, that shirt is way too old. You look like a homeless person. I'm serious. People are going to think I don't take care of you." I smiled uncomfortably and told her I'd change it. The next day I went to the store and bought 2 new shirts in lighter colors. When I put one on, Emily looked at me and just shrugged. "At least it looks a little better." I started to fixate on all my gestures. When I coughed, I covered my mouth. When I walked, I tried to be quiet. When I ate, I swallowed quickly so I wouldn't make noise. Sometimes I felt like a lost guest in my own home. Every time I was about to say something, I'd stop for a second, afraid of being annoying. I kept telling myself my daughter was just tense from the divorce, from having to raise 2 kids alone. Maybe she didn't realize her words cut sharper than a knife, but those phrases became more frequent, and each one pushed me a little further away from those peaceful days. One night, while we were eating dinner, I coughed a couple of times. Emily put down her spoon and scowled. "Dad, you should go get that checked out. Coughing like that at the table makes me lose my appetite." Mason looked up and stared at his mother with wide eyes. I hurried to say, "It's nothing. It just went down the wrong pipe." She continued in a flat voice, "Still, you should be careful. I don't want the kids to get sick." After that dinner, I ate in silence. When I wanted to talk, I waited until the kids were finished before opening my mouth, so I wouldn't interrupt. I felt like I was slowly fading away. From the table, from the conversations, from my own home. At night, I went out to the yard to water the roses. The cold wind slipped under my shirt collar, and the petals of Rose's roses trembled softly. I said quietly, as if she were still there, Honey, I think our daughter's just really tired. She says things I don't think she even notices. But Rose didn't answer. Only the scent of the roses floated in the air, that soft perfume I used to love, and that now brought an unexplainable sadness. I looked up at my daughter's bedroom window, where the yellow light was still filtering through. I wanted to believe that in the morning she would smile again, call me Dad, like before. But deep down, I knew something was cracking. Silent, small, but big enough to make my heart tremble like a petal about to fall. That afternoon, I was in the yard pruning the rose bushes Rose had planted years ago. It had just rained, and the smell of damp earth and rotting leaves rose in harsh waves. I heard my daughter's voice talking inside the house. Her tone was low but hurried. I wasn't trying to listen, but when I heard my name, I couldn't move the shears anymore. Sarah, you don't understand. Emily's voice sounded broken. Living with an old man is horrible. Everything he does drives me crazy. He breathes loud, he coughs, he spills coffee on the table, and the whole house is starting to smell. Like old age. A silence. Then she continued with more irritation. I'm grateful he's letting us stay, but Sister, I can't stand it. Ever since Mom died, he's gotten weird. He talks to himself. He stares at the wall for hours. Sometimes he scares me, like really scares me. Living with an elderly person is disgusting. I squeezed the shears until my knuckles turned white. Every word hit me like a nail in the head. Disgusting. Gross. Words I never imagined my own daughter could use for her father. I heard her laugh uncomfortably into the phone. But I can't leave yet, you know. I don't have a job, I don't have any money. I have to at least stick it out until I find another place. It'll be such a relief. I couldn't listen anymore. The shears fell to the ground, the bright blades stained with mud. I stood motionless for a long time. The drizzle started again, and every cold drop hit my hands. That cold wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from my own heart. When I went into the house, she had just hung up. When she saw me, she forced a smile. Dad, you're all wet. Go change your shirt. I just nodded and walked straight to my room. I closed the door, and the room filled with a thick silence. On the dresser was the photo of Rose, the wooden frame now aged. I looked at her smile and, for the first time, I felt like an old object that people want to hide out of shame. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, hearing the tick-tock of the clock like hammer blows on my heart. I kept asking myself, am I really that disgusting? I replayed my every move. I shower every day. I wash my clothes carefully. I always save the best part of the meal for the kids. But maybe to Emily, all my effort meant nothing. Maybe the simple fact that I was still alive was an annoyance to her. Around dawn, I looked at myself in the mirror. In the foggy glass, an old man stared back at me. Wrinkled skin, white hair, sunken eyes. I touched my face and felt cold. Yes, I was old, but I never thought being old was a crime that made people want to pull away. I sat in the chair and looked at Rose's picture again. You see, honey, I whispered, our daughter's all grown up, but it seems like she forgot how to love. Maybe I taught her something wrong. I sighed. Outside, the sun was rising, but inside me, the darkness was just beginning. I had tried to endure it, to think that my daughter was just going through a hard time, that when she calmed down, she'd understand she had said things she shouldn't have. But that day, in the bright kitchen, all my illusions fell apart. I was making tea when I heard the door bang against the wall. Emily came in with a tired face, her hair a mess and a bag in her hand. Dad, could you give me a minute? I need to put these groceries in the fridge. Her voice sounded indifferent, as if I were just one more obstacle in her kitchen. I put the kettle aside and moved. I'm just making a cup. I'll be done in a second, she sighed. You've already made tea 3 times today. Is it good to drink that much? That smell lingers in the whole house. I didn't answer. I picked up my mug and started to head out to the porch, but she spoke again, this time her voice trembling, as if trying to say something difficult. Dad, I know it's my fault I'm irritable, but living together isn't easy. Everything you do makes me uncomfortable. You walk around making noise, you leave water on the floor. You make me feel suffocated. I froze. Suffocated, I repeated slowly. She nodded, avoiding my gaze. Dad, I don't know how to say this nicely, but sometimes just hearing you cough gives me the chills. It's not that I hate you, it's just I can't stand it anymore. That last sentence was like a slap. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice calm. So, my presence makes you that uncomfortable? She clenched her fists. Her voice got quiet. Don't get me wrong, I love you, but older people like you, they have smells, habits. I can't change how I feel. You make me... She went quiet for a second and then finished with a broken voice. You make me feel repulsed. In my head, I heard a crack. I left the mug on the counter and asked slowly, repulsed? Honey, do you know what you just said? She burst into tears. I didn't mean to. I just want you to understand that it's really hard. I'm sorry. I looked at her for a long time, without anger, without blame, just with a huge emptiness. Are you sorry for how you feel? Or are you sorry that I'm still here for you to put up with? Don't say that. I'm just tired, that's all. I shook my head gently. No, Emily, you're not tired. You're just being honest about something you've felt for a long time. I spoke slowly, each word cutting my tongue. And now I have to be honest with myself too. I'm not anyone's joy here anymore. I'm just a burden. I turned, my voice rough like stones scraping together. Don't worry, you won't have to put up with me anymore. Emily stood frozen. Where are you going, Dad? I didn't answer. I just muttered, as if talking to myself. When affection turns into disgust, leaving is the only way to keep a little dignity. I walked out of the kitchen. Behind me I heard her crying, but I didn't turn back. Some tears come too late, and some words, once spoken, never find their way back. I didn't sleep at all that night. The house was so quiet I could clearly hear every second pass on the clock. Each tick-tock was like a small cut, tearing apart what was left inside me. Trust, a father's love, and the last trace of dignity. Outside, the night wind whistled through the iron gate, bringing the smell of damp earth and the chill of the coming winter. I sat at the table, in front of a cup of ice-cold coffee. The yellow light spilled onto the old photos in their wooden frames. Rose, hugging our little girl, me standing beside them, my hand on her shoulder. I touched the glass carefully, my hand shaking. Everything I'd ever had, a wife, a daughter, faith, was now just a memory hanging on the wall. I remembered the afternoon I overheard her phone call. I thought then that if Rose were alive, she would know how to make our daughter understand. But Rose was gone, and this house, which was our home, had become a temporary shelter for an annoying old man. I got up and opened the desk drawer. Inside were old papers, a few savings passbooks, an envelope with the note assets, open only if necessary. I picked up a pen and wrote the name of the only person who could understand me. Mr. Davis, my friend and lawyer for over 30 years. Under his name, I wrote, "Urgent, I want to change my will." Then I opened my small notebook, where I usually jot things down. On the last blank page, I wrote, "If my presence makes my daughter feel repulsion, maybe the best gift I can give her is my absence. Starting tomorrow, I will leave this house, not in a fit of anger, but with the clarity of someone who has understood that even love needs boundaries." I put the pen down. I looked at the lines I had just written and felt my heart lighten a little. Not because the pain was gone, but because I finally knew what to do. Just before dawn, I went out to the yard. The sun wasn't up yet, but Rose's roses were still fragrant. I bent down. I carefully cut a stem and put it in a small vase on the little memorial shelf. The candlelight lit up Rose's photo. Her sweet smile seemed to look at me with understanding. "I'm tired, Rose," I whispered. "I tried to teach her how to love, but maybe I failed. Let silence be the one to finish teaching her what I couldn't." I packed a few changes of clothes and some small items. The fruit knife Rose used to use, my old notebook, the 1992 family photo. Nothing else. I didn't need much because you can't carry the past with you on a journey to find yourself again. When the sun came up, the pale light filtered through the window and reflected on the cold coffee cup from the night before. I looked at it and smiled faintly. The coffee's aroma had faded, just like that affection that was once warm and now only left a bitter taste. I knew I would leave that same day, without warning, without a trace. Would I leave her? The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. The sun was barely touching the tips of the rose bushes on the porch, and the smell of the night's dew was still on the grass. I heard Emily's voice in the kitchen, talking to Sophia about school, her tone hurried and distant. I didn't go in. I just stood in the doorway watching them. It was like looking at a painting I had done myself, which was now hanging in someone else's house. I didn't belong there anymore. When the kids left the house, I called Mr. Davis. He was still the only person I trusted. I need to see you today, I told him. I want to sell all my assets as soon as possible. On the other end, Davis was quiet for a few seconds before asking, Arthur, is something wrong? You sound upset. I need to be sure you're not acting out of anger, I answered quietly. No, Davis, I'm more clear-headed than ever. It's just time to put everything in order. That afternoon, I went to his office. Davis looked at me with sad eyes. Where are you planning to go? I smiled. Anywhere my breathing doesn't bother anyone. We shook hands and he started preparing the paperwork. My house, the 2 rental condos, and the bank savings, everything would be sold. Davis advised me to at least keep a part of it in case I wanted to come back. I nodded, even though deep down I knew that coming back would mean failing again. For the next 10 days, I lived like a shadow. I talked and smiled normally. I kept taking and picking up my grandkids from school. I kept eating dinner with my daughter. But every night when they were asleep, I quietly packed my things. I arranged papers and photos in my suitcase. Some nights I stood for hours in the living room, listening to the clock and thinking about Rose. I'm leaving, Rose, I'd whisper. This time, not to run away, but to save myself. On the 10th day, everything was ready. Davis called to tell me the money was in my temporary account, waiting to be withdrawn. In total, it was $710,000, a whole life of work and savings turned into a few cold numbers. I didn't feel joy, only emptiness. I told myself, if these numbers can buy a little peace, I'll pay it without hesitation. That afternoon, Emily left for a job interview. I took the chance to call Mason and Sophia into the living room. Come here, I have something to tell you, Mason smiled. What's up, Grandpa? I looked at them, and it was like looking at Emily and Sarah when they were little. I love you more than anything in the world, no matter what happens. Remember that I will always love you. Sophia took my hand. Grandpa, why are you talking like you're going far away? I smiled, trying to hide the tremor. We all have to go somewhere, sometime, honey. That night I wrote a long letter and left it carefully on the dining room table, right in the spot where Emily sat. On the envelope, I put 4 words. Don't look for me. Then I folded the old family photo and put it in my shirt pocket. Outside, Rose's roses were in full bloom. I breathed in deeply, letting their scent fill my lungs, like a farewell. At dawn, when the sun came up, I would leave that house as if I had never existed there. I left the house the next morning, as the sun was just peeking over the red rooftops. Emily and the kids were still asleep. I stopped at the doorway, looking at the house one last time. The wedding photo of Rose and me hanging on the wall. The old wooden chair where I used to read the newspaper. The curtain that Rose had sewn by hand. Everything was silent, as if waiting for a goodbye. On the dining room table, I left the envelope I'd written the night before. Inside was the letter, perhaps the last lines I would ever write to my daughter. Emily, you once said my presence made you sick. So, I've decided to give you what you've always wanted. My absence. I've sold the house, the 2 condos, and withdrawn all my savings. From now on, you won't have to smell old age, or hear my cough, or my slow footsteps. You won't have to put up with an annoying old man anymore. Consider this my last gift to you, the gift of freedom. If you ever miss me, don't look for me, because I'll be far away, in a place where no one remembers my name. I'm not angry or resentful. I'm just sad that in the end, you taught me that sometimes loving also means knowing how to disappear. Live well, because from now on, you'll have to take care of your 2 children alone. Arthur. I folded the letter carefully and left it in the center of the table, next to a rose I had cut from the yard the night before. I chose that stem with care, pale pink petals still covered in dew. Rose used to say that roses symbolize love, even though they have thorns. Maybe I wanted my daughter to remember that. All love can hurt. At 8 o'clock sharp, the moving truck arrived. I asked them to only take a few valuable items, the television, the stereo, the computer. I left the dining table, the wooden chair, and all those things soaked in memories. I wanted Emily to understand that what was left in that house had no material value, but it should have been the most valuable. When I picked up my small suitcase, I felt my heart tighten. In my hand, I had the family photo from when Rose was still alive, the three of us smiling under the tree in the yard. I kissed the photo and walked through the door. I didn't look back. Never again. On the way to the airport, I rolled down the window to let the wind come in and blow away the scent of roses still on my clothes. Inside me, only one sentence repeated softly, like a farewell to everything. I'm not dead. I'm just disappearing, to keep the little dignity that love forgot. And when the plane took off, looking down at the small city falling away behind me, I knew that Arthur Miller had just finished his former life. When Emily got home that afternoon, the kids ran in first, excitedly telling her their stories from school. She left her bag on the table and called out, "Dad, I brought donuts for the kids." There was no answer. The house was strangely silent. She thought I might be resting and started looking for me everywhere. But my room was empty, the closet wide open, the drawers empty, only a few broken hangers left. Emily called my name all over the house. "Dad? Dad?" No one answered. She walked into the living room and saw a white envelope on the table next to a wilting rose. With trembling hands, she opened the letter. As she read the first line, she collapsed into the chair, her eyes wide. When she finished, the letter fell from her hands. It can't be. Dad can't really be gone. She burst into tears, her tears blurring my words. Mason came over, scared. "Mommy, where's Grandpa?" Emily hugged her son, sobbing. "He's gone, honey. Grandpa's gone." The house filled with the cries of the two children, mixed with the panicked sobs of a mother. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She sat there reading the letter over and over, as if reading it enough times could change the words. The next morning, she called Aunt Helen, my sister. Her voice was shaking. "Aunt Helen, Dad's disappeared. He left a letter. He says he's not coming back." Helen was quiet for a long time. Then she asked softly, "Emily, what did you say to your father?" I don't know. I said stupid things. I didn't mean it, Aunt Helen." Helen came to the house that same day. When she heard Emily's story, she just sighed. "Honey, your father's a man with dignity. You couldn't talk to him like that. You know, he called me before he left. He sold everything. The house, the 2 rental condos. He took all the money." Emily's eyes went wide. "That can't be. He had that much money?" Helen looked at her fixedly, her voice cold. "Did you think he only had this house? He spent his whole life saving. If he sold everything, he must have close to $1 million. That sentence hit like a hammer. Emily staggered, her lips trembling. $1 million? Helen nodded. "That's right. And if he took it all, it means you'll never find him." Emily collapsed onto the floor, her hands on her head. She screamed in desperation. If I had known he had that much money, I wouldn't have said those things." Helen frowned, her voice sharp as a knife. "So you only regret the money and not your father?" She fell silent. Only the sound of Sophia and Mason crying filled the house. Helen looked at the scene with a heavy heart. "Honey, the problem isn't how much money your father had. The problem is that you made him feel like he wasn't worth anything. That's what he couldn't stand." Emily dropped her head onto the table, her hair tangled, her voice broken. "I just wanted to vent. I never thought that he'd believe I hated him." Helen gently put a hand on her shoulder. "Your father didn't believe it. He felt it. And when you feel contempt from your own blood, you never come back." That night, in the huge, empty house, only the wind coming through the window and the late tears remained. Emily, sitting in the darkness, clutched the letter to her chest and whispered, "Dad, I was wrong. But maybe I said that far too late." The plane landed in Miami at dusk, when the sky still held a faint orange sunset. From the window, I looked at the rows of yellow lights below, spreading out like a glittering river. I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of strangeness and relief. After 71 years of living in the same state, in the same house, I was now setting foot in a place where nobody knew my name. I left the airport with a small suitcase and the envelope of cash that Mr. Davis had prepared for me. Outside, no one was waiting for me. No one called my name. For the first time in my life, I was truly an anonymous man, and that feeling made me feel strangely free. A middle-aged man, a friend of Davis, picked me up at the curb. He helped me rent a small apartment near the beach and gave me pointers on getting a temporary ID. "You can start over here," he told me in a firm voice. "Nobody cares who you were before." I nodded and answered quietly, "That's exactly what I need." The first few days, I barely spoke to anyone. In the mornings, I'd walk along the shore, listening to the crash of the waves, breathing in the salty air that got caught in my gray hair. At noon, I'd eat some bread, drink black coffee, and sit on the balcony watching people pass by. In the afternoons, I'd go to the nearby park and watch the old men play chess. I didn't know anyone, but I felt at peace, a peace I had long forgotten at home. My apartment was small, with a balcony that faced the sea. Every morning I'd open the window to let the breeze in, bringing the sound of the waves and the smell of the sun. I started writing in a journal again, something I used to do when Rose was still alive. In my notebook, I wrote simple sentences. Day 1, still alive. No one despises me. No one avoids me. At night, I'd turn on a dim light, make a cup of coffee, and read the old books I'd brought with me. Sometimes I'd see Rose's reflection in the window glass, her sweet smile, her understanding look. I'd murmur, "I'm okay, Rose. No one here calls me disgusting." A week later, I started to meet some neighbors, mostly retired folks. They called me Mr. Art. I told them I was a widower and had come to live by the sea so I could breathe better. No one asked any more questions. No one needed to know the truth. Sometimes on the beach, I'd see kids playing, kicking up sand. Their laughter reached deep into my heart. I'd remember Mason and Sophia. Every time it happened, I'd turn my gaze to the sun sinking into the horizon and tell myself, "Kids, Grandpa is still doing okay. Don't worry about me. Even if you don't know it, every morning I pray for you to be at peace." Over time, I got used to my new life. No one talked about the past. No one made me feel like I was in the way. Every time I made coffee, I'd ask myself, is this the freedom you only find after you've lost everything? And every time the waves hit the shore, I'd hear Rose's voice whispering in the wind. "Arthur, disappearing isn't always running away. Sometimes it's the only way to keep on living." I met Marianne one morning in June. I was sitting at a small cafe by the sea, the kind that sells hot coffee in paper cups and croissants dusted with sugar. She was at the next table, her gray hair streaked with a bit of black, wearing thin glasses and reading the newspaper quietly. I wasn't planning to start a conversation until she turned to me. She smiled gently and said, "You're not from around here, are you? I can tell by your accent." I smiled and replied, "No, but now I'm just an anonymous old man who lives by the sea." She let out a kind laugh. "An anonymous man with such a clear Midwestern accent? I'm Mary Ann, a widow, originally from New Orleans. And you?" "I'm Arthur Miller," I replied, hesitating for a second. "Also a widower." From that day on, we'd accidentally meet every morning. Sometimes she'd bring homemade pastries. Other times I'd buy her a coffee. We talked about everything: books, the sea, old age, and those wounds that time can't quite erase. Once, when I asked her why she still came to the beach every day under the hot sun, she smiled. "Because out here, the waves don't ask me about my past." I stayed quiet because I understood exactly what she meant. Marianne lived alone in an apartment 2 blocks from mine. She told me her husband had died of an illness and that her children lived far away. "Older people just need someone to listen to them," she said. I nodded. For the first time in many months, I felt I could speak without fear of being despised. I told her about Rose. Not everything, just fragments. How she smiled, how she planted her roses, how I lost her one rainy afternoon. Marianne listened without interrupting, just resting her hand on mine, warm and light as the wind. "You loved her very much, didn't you?" she said. I nodded, my eyes wet. One night we went for a walk on the sand. The moon lit up the sea with silver flecks. She told me about her native New Orleans, about old nights listening to jazz tunes, and I told her about springtime in Ohio, about the beaches Rose and I promised to visit and never did. When we were quiet, the waves spoke for us. I realized that some sorrows don't need to be cured. They just need someone to sit next to you, in silence. From that day on, Mary Ann became my companion. We didn't talk about the future or name the past. Every morning she'd knock on my door with the smell of freshly baked bread. I'd make coffee. I'd put on classical music at a low volume. We'd sit on the balcony watching the sunrise without needing to say anything. Once, she looked at me for a long time and asked, "You have a sadness in your eyes I don't understand. It's not just the sadness of a widower." I smiled, looking away. "It's the sadness of a father who lost his daughter while they were both still alive." She took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Arthur, you can start over. No one is too old to be loved again." I smiled, but in my mind, the image of Emily in the kitchen flashed for a second, her eyes avoiding mine, her dry voice. "Dad, you disgust me." I took a sip of coffee, looking at the sea. The waves kept hitting the shore. "There are wounds," I said, "that neither time nor kindness can heal, Mary Ann. But thank you for reminding me that I'm still a human being." I thought my life had finally calmed down, that the rest of it would flow like the sea out there, silent, immense, with no more storms. But one morning, Mr. Davis called me from Ohio. His voice sounded serious with a hint of hesitation. "Arthur, I need to tell you something. Emily has filed a lawsuit against you." I froze. "A lawsuit? Why?" "She's asking the court to nullify the sale of the house and your assets. She's claiming you weren't in your right mind, that you were depressed, and that someone manipulated you. They want to bring you back to Ohio to protect the family's interests." I let out a dry laugh, like falling sand. "So, after all, my daughter thinks I'm crazy." Davis sighed. "She's framing it from an emotional angle. She says a father in his right mind wouldn't just leave like that, wouldn't cut off all communication, wouldn't leave a letter like that." I went out to the balcony and looked at the deep blue sea. The waves continued their course, indifferent to the affairs of men. I spoke slowly. "Tell her this for me. A clear-headed father doesn't stay where he's considered disgusting." Davis was silent. I clearly heard him sigh on the other end of the phone. "Are you sure, Arthur? I could try to mediate." "No," I cut him off with a calm that surprised me. "Some things, once broken, can't be glued back together. Mediation only prolongs the pain." I told Mary Ann about it that afternoon. She was quiet for a long time and then said softly, "She doesn't understand what you're trying to protect." "I know," I replied. "Emily thinks I'm crazy. Because in her world, only money and comfort are worth saving. Dignity to her is an old man's luxury." She put her hand on my shoulder with a sad but sweet look. "Maybe she doesn't understand, but she's scared of losing her father for good." I didn't answer. That night I stayed alone, the sea breeze coming in cold through the window. I opened my notebook to the last page where I had written, "Loving also means knowing how to disappear." I picked up the pen. I wanted to add something, but my hand was shaking. In the end, I could only write one line. Maybe disappearing was never as easy as when you discover you've already been erased from someone's heart. Weeks later, Davis sent me a copy of the lawsuit. I saw my name associated with cold words. Unstable psychological state, irrational acts, risk of financial manipulation. I finished reading, folded the paper, and let out a bitter smile. I thought how ironic it was. My whole life I worked to take care of my daughter, so no one would look down on her, so she'd have a safe roof over her head. And in the end, she's the one trying to prove to the world that I no longer have the capacity to decide for myself. That night, I stared at the sea. The waves were hitting harder than usual, as if reflecting the storm inside me. I whispered to myself, "Honey, If I'm really crazy, it's because I loved you too much. That morning I was at my usual cafe, watching the seagulls fly low over the water. Mary Ann had just left, the scent of the pastries she'd brought still on the table. I was drinking a sip of coffee, about to open my notebook, when the phone buzzed. The caller's name appeared on the screen. Helen. My heart stopped for a second. She hadn't called in a long time. Helen's voice on the other end was choked, filled with panic. "Arthur, it's Mason, the boy." I shot up from my chair, feeling all the noise in the cafe go silent. "What's wrong, Helen? Talk to me." On the other end, there were only sobs. "The boy. He took sleeping pills. They took him to the hospital. He left a note saying he was going to find you." I was petrified. The cup fell from my hand and shattered on the floor. All eyes in the cafe turned to me, but I couldn't hear anything. Helen's sentence repeated in my head. "He was going to find you." That same afternoon, I was at the airport. I didn't have time to pack anything. I just grabbed my small suitcase. Mary Ann stopped me to ask what was wrong. I answered her hurriedly. "My grandson, he tried to die, looking for me." She looked at me in horror and just nodded. "Go, Arthur. Go get back what you lost." The flight lasted over 10 hours, but for me, it was like crossing an entire lifetime. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the emptiness outside the window. In the darkness, Mason's face appeared to me, the boy who called me a hero. I remembered when he'd sit on my shoulders, laughing while we watched baseball. Now he was lying somewhere between life and death, while I was safe in a faraway place. Guilt rose in my throat like a knot, choking me. When the plane landed in Chicago, I ran straight to the hospital. Helen was waiting for me in the hallway, her face exhausted. When she saw me, she burst into tears. "Thank God you're back." I took her hand. My voice was breaking. "Is he alive?" "Yes," she replied, "but very weak. The doctor said if we'd gotten here an hour later." I didn't let her finish. I ran into the intensive care unit. Mason was lying there, his face pale, with an IV in his arm. I went to his bed and sat down. My heart ached seeing the folded paper on the table next to him, the note he had left. I opened it. The childish letters were shaking. "I'm going to find you, because Mommy always cries. I thought if I found you, you would know how to make everyone laugh again." Tears fell onto the words. I whispered, "I was wrong, Mason. My silence has hurt more than any words." I took his small, still warm hand. "I'm here now, son. This time, I'm not leaving." In that white room, the heart monitor beeped out a slow rhythm. I stayed there all night, squeezing his hand, as if letting go meant losing him forever. And in that moment, I understood. Disappearing doesn't always save anyone. Sometimes, it just plants a deeper wound. The next morning, the first rays of sun cut through the thin white curtain of the hospital room. Mason was still asleep. His breathing was steady but weak. I stayed by his side, not letting go of his hand. I hadn't closed my eyes all night. I was afraid that if I did, he would slip out of my life like so many other things already had. When the doctor came in, I stood up. He spoke in a low voice. The boy was lucky. The number of pills wasn't enough to put him in serious danger, but he needs care. He needs peace and love. I nodded. "Peace," I repeated, my voice cracking. "I'm the one who took that from him." Around noon, Mason woke up. He opened his eyes slowly, his gaze lost. When he saw me, he murmured, "Grandpa, I'm sorry." I squeezed his hand tightly, shaking. "No, I'm the one who should be sorry. I left you. I left your mother alone. I was wrong." Tears were falling on his hand. He smiled weakly. "I dreamed about you, sitting, drinking coffee, looking at the sea. I wanted to go with you." I was speechless and could only nod. "Don't you go anywhere, son. From now on, I'll be right here." When Emily came in, her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken from sleepless nights. She stood in the doorway, not daring to come closer. I turned to look at her, my heart full of mixed feelings, anger, tenderness, and a sadness impossible to name. Her voice trembled. "Dad, I didn't think things would go this far." I stayed silent and motioned for her to come closer. She sat in the chair on the other side of the bed, Her head bowed. Mason took his mother's hand in mine, his voice barely a whisper. I don't want to see you fight anymore. In that room, no one spoke after that. You could only hear the heart monitor beeping its slow rhythm and the murmur of the wind outside. I looked at my daughter, and I could see a real fear in her eyes. It wasn't defense or pride anymore, but the fear of losing what little was left. In the afternoon, when Mason had fallen back asleep, I went out into the hallway. Emily followed me. We stood looking at the hospital courtyard, where the eucalyptus trees whispered in the wind. "Dad," she began, her voice choked, "if I tell you I want to start over, would you believe me?" I looked at her for a long time. "Do you know what starting over means?" "It means I'm going to listen. I'm going to be quiet when I should. And I'm never going to forget that you were the only one who didn't abandon me." I smiled bitterly. "But you were the one who forced me to leave." She lowered her head, tears falling. "I know. And every day I wonder how I can get you to forgive me." I didn't answer right away. I looked up at the sky where the clouds were passing slowly and said, "Forgiving isn't forgetting, Emily. It's learning to look back without hatred. I'm not there yet. But maybe Mason just helped me take the first step." Emily nodded, her eyes red. "I'll do whatever it takes to make you trust me again." I looked back at the room where my grandson slept peacefully and murmured, "Start by keeping him smiling every day. That's the only thing I need." And in that moment, for the first time in many months, I felt like I was truly coming back. That afternoon, when Mason was fully awake and sleeping peacefully, I went out into the hall. The sunset light spread across the tiled floor, staining it an orange color like dying embers. Emily was alone at the end of the corridor, her hands clasped, looking out the window. The wind from the hospital garden came in and gently moved her hair. When she heard my footsteps, she turned. That look, a mix of fear and pleading, made my heart ache. I stopped a few feet from her. A long silence passed between us. Neither of us knew where to begin. In the end, it was Emily who spoke first. "Dad, I don't have any more words to justify myself." Her voice was shaking. "Every night I think about you. I read your letter, line by line, and I'm filled with shame. I thought I was strong, but really I was just a coward who hurts others to forget her own fear." I didn't say anything, just looked at her. The fading light lit up her thin face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. She continued, her voice breaking. "The day you left, I thought I hated you for leaving me, but I really hated myself. I hated myself for saying those miserable things. I thought you'd come back, that you'd yell at me, but you stayed quiet. And that silence kills me every day." I stepped closer, standing in front of her. "You know," I said quietly, "I wanted to write you another letter, but I didn't. I was afraid you'd only read it with your head, not with your heart." She looked up, unable to hold back the tears. "Dad, you hate me." I sighed. "No, honey. I don't have the strength to hate you. But I was disappointed, not because you hurt me, but because you forgot what I taught you since you were little, that real love never makes someone else feel like a burden." Emily covered her face, sobbing. I'm sorry, Dad. If I could change everything, just to hear you call me honey one more time, I'd do it, even if I lost everything." I put my hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. "I don't need you to lose anything. I just need you to keep your promise to Mason. Let him grow up without carrying the shadow that you and I created." She nodded, tears soaking her clothes. After a long moment, she murmured, "Dad, can I ask you something? When you were in Miami, did you ever think about me?" I smiled, my lips trembling. "Every morning. When I made coffee, I poured 2 cups, one for me and one for you. But you never came." Emily broke down, hiding her face in my chest. I felt the hot salt of her tears soaking through my shirt. I hugged her without saying anything else. Outside, the sky was growing dark, the wind passing through the trees, bringing the smell of earth and hope. For the first time in years, I said her name again. My voice was rough but tender. "It's okay, Emily. You're still my daughter." She sobbed, whispering, and you're still the most beautiful thing I ever lost." After that afternoon, we left the hospital together. Mason stayed one more night for observation, and Emily and I walked along the path that led home. The Chicago sky at the end of winter was clear. The cold wind blew through the tall trees, and dry leaves swirled around our feet. We both walked in silence. We hadn't walked like this, father and daughter, in a long time. But between us there was still an emptiness that was hard to fill. When we got to the house, Emily started tidying up the living room, that place where I used to drink coffee every morning. There was a smell of dampness and dust in the air, but it didn't bother me. I sat in the old chair that had been mine for decades and spoke softly. "Emily, if you really want to start over, we need to clear some things up." She turned, an anxious look on her face. "What do you mean, Dad?" I looked around the house, which had witnessed both love and humiliation, and replied, "First, I'm not going to live here as someone who's being done a favor. I'm going to contribute to the expenses, whether it's a little or a lot. I don't have much, but I have enough to support myself. If you don't accept this, I'll leave." Emily was quiet and then nodded. "I never want you to feel like a burden again." "I promise," I continued. "Second, I don't want to hear a single offensive word, not even by accident. If at any time my presence makes you uncomfortable, tell me straight, and I'll leave immediately. I won't stay to hear one more insult." She lowered her head, her voice cracking. "You'll never hear those words again, I swear." I was silent for a moment and added, and finally, I want us to live somewhere else, not in this house. There are too many painful memories here. We need a fresh start, in a place where the voice of the past isn't still echoing." Emily looked around, her eyes full of tears. "I understand. I can't stand this house either. Every corner reminds me of my guilt." I got up, walked over, and put my hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to atone for anything. You just have to live differently." She took my hand, trembling. "Dad, I want you to stay. I want my kids to grow up knowing their grandpa wasn't the one who left, but the one who came back to teach them how to love." I nodded and smiled gently. "I'll stay, but not to be loved, to learn how to forgive." Emily burst into tears and hugged me. I felt her shoulders shake, as if all the pent-up years were finally coming out in one sob. Outside, the wind blew harder, but inside me, there was a strange calm. Maybe forgiveness doesn't start with forgetting, but with daring to stay, even with the fear of being hurt again. That night, for the first time in many months, I slept in the old house, no longer as the one who had left, but as someone trying to learn how to return. In the following days, the house began to come back to life. There were no more tears or that heavy silence that used to fill everything. Mason recovered faster than anyone expected, and Sophia wouldn't leave my side all day, as if she was afraid that if she turned around, I'd disappear again. Emily put effort into every small gesture. In the mornings, she'd get up early to make me coffee. At night, we'd all eat dinner together. I'd watch her clumsily chop an onion, her eyes watery, a faint smile on her face. Maybe this is how someone relearns the language of love. I started teaching Mason how to fix the old bicycle in the yard, while Sophia helped me water the flowers. Rose's rose bushes, dry from neglect, began to turn green again, after being pruned and given new soil. Seeing the small buds open, I understood that inside me, a fragile shoot was also sprouting. Forgiveness. One evening, while we were eating dinner, Mason asked suddenly, "Grandpa, are you still mad at Mom?" I looked at him for a long time and smiled. "No, I'm not mad. I'm just learning to understand her better." The boy nodded with childish seriousness. "So you're forgiving her, right?" I laughed softly and gave him a little tap on the head. "Forgiving isn't something you say, Mason. It's when you can look back without it hurting. I'm walking toward that." Emily looked at me, her eyes wet, and said quietly, "Dad, thank you for still being here." I replied simply, "Thank you for letting me come back." From that day on, we started to pack up the house. I sold some old furniture, and Emily found a small apartment near the lake, a place where I could plant Rose's roses again. When I placed the first cutting in the earth, Emily beside me with a watering can, she asked, "Do you think it will live?" I looked at the damp soil and answered gently, "If there's love, it will live." Flowers, like people, just need a little care to be reborn. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the distant sound of the waves. Emily came out and wrapped Rose's old scarf around my shoulders. "I found it in your closet," she said. I nodded and smiled. In that moment, I understood that I was no longer a man lost between resentment and affection. I had returned, not to the old house, but to my own heart. And I knew that when the roses bloomed the next day, they wouldn't just be new flowers. They would be a true beginning. A year has passed since my return. The new house is smaller, simpler, but it's full of life. Every morning, the aroma of coffee fills the kitchen. Sophia's laughter mixes with Mason's voice yelling, "Grandpa, come see my shot!" Emily leaves early for work and always leaves a little note on the table. "Dad, don't forget to eat breakfast." Those crooked letters, to me, are worth more than all the assets I once lost. Rose's rose bushes have bloomed again. Every time I look at them, I feel like she's still here, soft, silent, watching over us. One time, Emily asked me, "Dad, do you think Mom would forgive me?" I answered her, "If Rose were alive, she wouldn't ask. She'd just hug you, because real love doesn't need excuses." In the afternoon, with the sunlight coming in at an angle through the window, I wrote the last lines in my notebook. Forgiveness doesn't come in a single day, but in every small act. A shared meal, a cup of coffee, a kind question. Maybe that's how love is reborn, not with noise, but with consistency. Emily came out to the porch with 2 cups of coffee. "I made yours a little stronger," she said with a warm voice. I took the cup and looked at her. Her smile today reminded me of Rose, but it also gave me peace. "Dad," she asked, "do you ever regret leaving?" I shook my head gently. "No. If I hadn't left, I would never have known how much you could change. Sometimes silence is the only way love makes itself heard." We sat next to each other, watching the sunset. Mason and Sophia ran and laughed nearby. I took a sip of coffee. The bitterness from the beginning had turned into a soft sweetness. In the wind, I thought I heard Rose's voice whispering, "I told you, Arthur. Love just needs to be said." "Don't let silence kill it," I smiled, muttering to myself. "Don't wait until it's too late to say, 'I love you, honey,' because there are words that, if kept in for too long, turn into eternal silence." And on that afternoon, among the faint scent of the roses, I felt my heart grow light. After all, I had learned how to love again, with words and with just the right amount of silence. If this story captivated you, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the box on the left of the screen. Thanks for watching.